I am a father, and I've always prided myself on the things I've done for my family. Starting a small business from scratch wasn't easy, but it was something I poured my heart and soul into. It's been a journey of long hours, sacrifices, and struggles, but it was mine, and it represented everything I had worked for. For years, I had hoped that one day, this business would not just be something that would provide for me, but something that would provide for my children as well. I wanted to build a legacy, something that could carry on beyond me. But despite the hard work and effort, I found myself at a crossroads. When my daughter, Rachel, was 18, she received the news that she had been accepted into her dream college. She had worked tirelessly for that acceptance, balancing academics, extracurriculars, and her personal life. I could see how much this meant to her. I could see the excitement and pride in her eyes. As a father, it was a moment of pride for me, too. I knew how hard she had worked to get there, and it seemed like the beginning of a bright future. But then, I found myself facing a dilemma. The business was struggling. I had built it from the ground up, but there were areas I couldn't handle on my own anymore. The demands had grown, and I was overwhelmed. Despite all the hard work, the growth I had hoped for just wasn't happening at the pace I needed it to. I had been working long hours and pouring everything into the company, but I was reaching my limit. It wasn't failing yet, but it wasn't thriving either. And that's when I realized I needed help. I couldn't continue like this alone. I knew Rachel was passionate about her future, but I also knew how much she cared about me and how deeply she wanted to help the family. So, I sat her down and explained the situation. I told her about the struggles the company was facing and how, despite my best efforts, I couldn't keep up with the demands. I needed her. I needed her to step in, to help me run things for a while, at least until I could get back on my feet. I didn't want her to abandon her dreams, but I needed her support. That's when I made her a promise. I told her that if she helped me now, the company would be hers one day. It would be our legacy, something that she could carry on and pass down to her own children. I painted it as an opportunity to build something bigger than herself, something that would set her up for a future beyond what a college degree could offer. It was more than just a business. It was the future of our family, and I wanted her to be a part of that. I told her that it wasn't about abandoning her dreams. I made it sound like she could still achieve everything she wanted. This could be part of her journey, not a detour. I told her I didn't want her to sacrifice anything, but rather to seize this moment to help out the family and build something that could last a lifetime. I assured her that this wasn't a decision she had to make lightly, but that it was an opportunity that didn't come every day. Rachel was torn. I could see the hesitation in her eyes, but I could also see the love she had for me and the family. I knew she felt guilty leaving me to handle everything alone, but I could tell she was reluctant to give up the dream she had been working so hard for. It wasn't an easy decision for her, but in the end, she agreed to stay and help me. It wasn't that she didn't want to go to college, it was that she believed in me, and she wanted to make sure the business had a fighting chance. I thought I had made the right decision. I convinced myself that this was the right move for both of us, that she would eventually thank me for giving her this opportunity. I knew she could handle it. After all, she had always been a hard worker. And I believed that, in the long run, she would look back and be glad she made the choice to help the family. The first few years were tough. Rachel threw herself into the work, learning the ropes, handling customers, managing finances, and dealing with the growing pains of the business. The hours were long, and the work was relentless, but we were both committed. Slowly, I started seeing progress. The business began to grow. Slowly, but surely, we gained more clients, we started to see more profits, and I began to feel that things were finally turning around. Rachel was working incredibly hard, and her efforts were beginning to pay off. I started to believe that we could really make this business something great. In those early years, I kept reminding her that this would all be hers one day. I didn't want her to forget that. I didn't want her to think that she was just working for me. She was working for her future. This was her chance to build something that would set her up for life, something that was bigger than just a job. I kept pushing her to see the bigger picture, to understand that this wasn't just about making money or keeping the business afloat. It was about creating something that would last, something she could be proud of. Rachel worked tirelessly. I could see it in her eyes, the determination to succeed, and the sacrifices she was making to help me. The long hours, the weekends spent at the office instead of out with friends. I knew she was doing this for the family, and it meant the world to me. Every day, I felt grateful that she was there, helping me keep the business alive. I could already see the potential for it to become something big, and I kept telling myself, just a little more, and she'll get what she deserves. But as time went on, I couldn't ignore the growing pressure. The business wasn't growing fast enough, and I felt like I was pushing Rachel too hard. I kept saying that things would get better, that we just needed a little more time, but I could see the exhaustion in her eyes, and I didn't want to be the one to keep her from chasing her own dreams. But at the same time, I couldn't imagine running the business without her. Looking back now, I wonder if I put too much on her shoulders too soon. Did I push her too hard? Did I ask her to sacrifice too much for the family business? At the time, I truly believed it was the right thing to do. I believed this was the best path for both of us. I just didn't realize the toll it would take on her and on our relationship. I hoped that this decision would lead to something great for her, for both of us, but I was too focused on the future to see the cost it was having on the present. Now, as I reflect on it all, I realize that maybe I didn't give her enough space to grow on her own. Maybe I was so focused on the business that I overlooked her needs, her aspirations, and the sacrifices she was making. The promise I made to her wasn't just about building a legacy, it was about her future too. And maybe I forgot that along the way. My daughter, instead of pursuing her college dreams, made the decision to stay by my side and help me with the family business. It wasn't an easy choice for her, and I could see the weight of that decision in her eyes. She was young, full of potential, and had her own aspirations, but she chose to put all of that aside to be there for me, to support the company that had been a part of our family for so long. She worked tirelessly, putting in countless hours and sacrificing her own youth and personal life in ways I couldn't help but feel both proud and guilty for. I often reminded her that one day, this company would be hers. It was a promise I made to her, a vision I had for the future. The company had always been the heart of our family, and I knew that with her dedication, we could take it to greater heights. I could see the potential in her, the same potential I once had when I first started, the same drive and determination that had gotten me to where I was today. But this time, I wasn't alone. My daughter was by my side, and together, we were building something that would last. There were days when I could see the exhaustion in her face, when I could hear the frustration in her voice. It wasn't easy for her, being tied to the company and taking on so much responsibility. There were times when she wanted to be out with friends, to experience the things that most people her age got to do, but she always put the company first. She was constantly learning, constantly adapting to new challenges, and always striving to improve. I never once saw her complain. Even when things were tough, when we had setbacks, or when the business didn't perform the way we wanted it to, she remained dedicated. Over time, the company began to grow. We saw improvements in efficiency, growth in sales, and, most importantly, we saw the fruits of our labor beginning to materialize. I could feel the pride swelling in my chest as I watched her handle situations I never imagined she could. She had become more than just an assistant or an extra pair of hands. She was starting to lead in her own way. Her sharp mind, her ability to stay calm under pressure, and her relentless work ethic were qualities that were turning the company into something we could both be proud of. It was in those moments, watching her take charge, that I realized how far we had come together. Every late night we spent working, every long meeting we sat through, every challenge we faced, it was all leading to this, and I began to believe, with certainty, that asking her to stay and help was the right decision. At the time, I had no idea if she would resent me for it or if she would regret not going to college. But as the company began to thrive, I saw that her sacrifices were paying off. I could see the pride in her eyes as we marked milestones together. We were building something real, something that would live on for years to come. But it wasn't just the business success that made me feel like we were on the right path. It was the bond we had formed through all of this. I had always been proud of her, but seeing her grow into someone who could handle this kind of responsibility made me proud in ways I hadn't expected. She was no longer just my daughter. She had become my partner, my equal. I began to see her not only as someone I had raised, but as someone who could take everything I had built and make it her own. And I felt a sense of peace in knowing that someday, when the time was right, the company would be in her hands. I had always dreamed of leaving a legacy for my children, but now I saw that the real legacy was not just in the company itself. It was in the bond we had created, in the way we worked together and supported each other. The company was growing, yes, but we were growing too, together. I could already see that this would be something great, something that would carry on for generations. This wasn't just about business. It was about family, about trust, and about the future. When I thought about the future of the company, I couldn't help but feel a deep sense of fulfillment. I had spent so many years working tirelessly to build this business, to make something out of nothing. But now I saw that it wasn't just my effort that mattered. It was hers too. She was putting her heart and soul into this just as I had once done. And it was clear to me that she would continue to carry this torch long after I was gone. I felt at peace knowing that the business, the work, and the family legacy would be in good hands. I knew that there would still be challenges ahead, that running a business was never easy, especially one that had grown to this level. But I had no doubt that my daughter would rise to the occasion just as she always had. She had proven herself time and time again, and I had no reason to believe that she wouldn't continue to excel. I was proud of her, not just for the work she had done, but for the person she had become. She had sacrificed so much, but in the process, she had gained something invaluable. And as I looked at her, ready to take the reins, I felt a sense of accomplishment and hope that I had never known before. We were building something real, something lasting, and I was excited to see where it would take us next. Everything started to shift when my son, James, decided to leave his tech career and join the family business. James had always been my pride and joy. He was the son I had high hopes for. And even though he never worked as hard as Rachel, my daughter, I still believed in him. He had this natural charm and confidence that made everyone around him admire him. I always thought he had great potential, even if he didn't always show it through hard work. So, when he announced that he wanted to leave his job in tech and come work with me, I was excited. I thought it was a sign that things were finally coming together. James had always been the one I could count on, and I thought maybe this would be the opportunity for him to prove himself. I was happy to think that, with both of my children working together, we could take the business to the next level. I had spent so many years trying to make this company a success, and having both of them by my side felt like it was the start of something great. I had Rachel helping me with the day-to-day operations, and now James was going to come in and add his unique skills to the mix. I believed the combination of their talents would elevate the business. At first, I didn't see any immediate signs of trouble. I welcomed James with open arms. I started giving him more responsibility, more authority in the business. He seemed enthusiastic about the opportunity and willing to put in the work. I gave him access to key decisions, thinking he could bring in fresh ideas and new perspectives. I was excited about the energy he brought with him. After all, he was my son, and I thought perhaps he could help take the company to greater heights. But what I didn't realize was that by giving James more power and recognition, I was unintentionally sidelining Rachel. Rachel had been the one who had poured her heart and soul into the business for years. She was the one who had been there when the business was struggling, working long hours and sacrificing her social life to keep it afloat. She had worked tirelessly and had made so many of the decisions that helped the business grow. Yet, as soon as James joined, my focus shifted, and I began to give him more credit. Rachel's ideas, which had once been praised, started to be overlooked in favor of James's opinions. His suggestions, even if they were the same ones Rachel had put forward, were suddenly seen as brilliant, while Rachel's contributions were dismissed. James's presence began to overshadow Rachel's, and I didn't even notice it at first. It felt natural to promote James, to give him more of a leadership role, but it wasn't fair to Rachel. She had built this company with me, and I had promised her that she would one day take it over. Instead, I was giving James everything, pushing Rachel out without even realizing it. I was so focused on the potential I saw in James that I couldn't see how much I was neglecting Rachel. I justified it by thinking James was bringing something new to the table, that his skills and his fresh perspective could help propel the business forward. But in reality, I was undermining Rachel's contributions, and I couldn't see it at the time. The tension between the two of them started to grow. Rachel, who had always been dedicated and loyal to the company, started feeling neglected. I saw it in her eyes. the disappointment and frustration. She would stay quiet when I praised James, even though she had been doing the same things for years. The little jabs that I didn't think twice about were cutting deep for Rachel. I kept pushing her to accept that James was just taking the lead, that this was a natural progression. But in my heart, I knew I was letting Rachel down. I didn't think much of it at first, but things started to unravel more quickly than I expected. James, with all his confidence and charm, had no problem asserting himself in the business, but it was clear he wasn't as prepared as I thought. He struggled with the complexities of running a company and managing its finances. The mistakes he made started to have serious consequences. Yet despite the mistakes and the growing tension between Rachel and him, I continued to support James. I thought it was just a phase, that he would figure things out, and that the two of them would eventually get along. But I was wrong. The deeper I got into my own work and the more I relied on James, the more I ignored Rachel. I failed to see that she had been the one keeping everything together all these years. It wasn't until things began to fall apart that I realized how much I had taken her for granted. I had spent years telling her the business would be hers one day, and yet I had handed it over to James without a second thought. I made a mistake, one that I didn't realize I was making until it was too late. I thought that by bringing James into the business, I was making a positive change, but all I was doing was eroding the foundation that Rachel had worked so hard to build. I could see the hurt in her eyes, but I didn't know how to fix it. I was too focused on James's success and what he could bring to the table to notice the damage I was doing to Rachel. As things progressed, I could tell that Rachel was becoming more and more disillusioned with the company and with me. I kept telling myself that this was just a phase, that everything would work out, but deep down, I knew I had messed up. The bond between us, the trust that had been built over years of working side by side, was starting to crack, and it was my fault. Looking back now, I can see that I had been blinded by my own desire for success. I had let my pride and my faith in James cloud my judgment. I had neglected Rachel's needs, her contributions, and her future. I didn't realize how much I had promised her until it was too late. I had made decisions that I thought were in the best interest of the business, but in reality, they were undermining everything Rachel had worked for. Now, I had to face the consequences of those decisions. One day, I called my daughter into my office, feeling like I needed to make a difficult decision. I had been thinking about the future of the company and the direction I wanted to take it, and I believed that it was time to bring in someone new to lead it to the next level. James had been showing an incredible amount of promise, and I had been impressed by his vision for the company. I thought that his fresh perspective and ambitious drive would push the business in the direction I believed it needed to go. I was confident that this was the right move, but what I didn't realize, or perhaps what I chose to ignore, was how this decision would affect my daughter. She had been by my side for so many years, working tirelessly to help build the company into what it had become. She had sacrificed her own dreams, her youth, and her personal life to help me, and now I was telling her that her place in the company was no longer necessary. I told her that I wanted her to step back, to give James the space to take over and lead. I explained that James had the vision and the drive to push the company to new heights, and I was convinced that it was what was best for the future. But as I spoke, I felt a strange emptiness inside. I had convinced myself that this decision was made with the company's best interests at heart, but I couldn't ignore the look in my daughter's eyes. I had just asked her to step away from something she had poured so much into, something she had given up so much of herself for. I tried to justify my decision, telling her that James was the right person for the job. I told her that he would take the company to places I couldn't, and that it was time for her to find a new path for herself. I said that perhaps it was better for her to step away from the business and focus on something different, something that was hers. But those words felt empty as soon as they left my mouth. I knew I was hurting her, but I convinced myself that it was for the best. Then, in a moment of frustration, I said something that I deeply regret to this day. I told her that I regretted giving her the opportunity to help me in the first place. I called her a failure, implying that she hadn't lived up to the potential I had hoped for her. I saw the hurt in her face, but I didn't stop. I was so caught up in my own justification, in my belief that I was doing the right thing for the company, that I didn't take a moment to consider how this would feel for her. I convinced myself that I was making the best choice for the business, but the truth was, I was making a decision that would break the bond we had worked so hard to build. I was telling my daughter that everything she had sacrificed, everything she had done for the company, didn't matter. I was telling her that her place in the business, in my life, was no longer needed. And that, to me, was the hardest part. She didn't say much in response. I could tell she was hurt, but she didn't fight back. She was always the kind of person who absorbed the pain, who tried to understand others before herself, but I saw the tears in her eyes, and I knew deep down that I had broken something in her. She left the office that day, her shoulders slumped, her face pale, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just made the worst decision of my life. For the days that followed, I tried to justify my actions. I told myself that James was the future of the company, that he had the right skills, the right vision, and the right drive. But no matter how much I tried to convince myself, I couldn't get rid of the gnawing feeling in my chest. I had betrayed my daughter. I had asked her to walk away from the very thing she had dedicated her life to, and in doing so, I had broken her trust. I didn't see it at the time, but I was so focused on the idea of what the company could become that I completely disregarded what my daughter had invested into it. I didn't consider the years she had spent by my side, helping to build it from the ground up. I didn't think about the sacrifices she had made, the moments she had given up to work late into the night, the weekends she had missed to ensure the company was thriving. In my mind, I was doing what was best for the business, but in reality, I was undermining everything she had worked for. I wasn't just asking her to step aside. I was telling her that her contributions didn't matter. I told myself that she would understand in time, that she would eventually see the logic in my decision. But I knew I was lying to myself. It wasn't about logic, it was about trust. And I had broken that trust. I had taken for granted the years of hard work and dedication she had put into the company, and I didn't understand the weight of what I had just done. As the days turned into weeks, the company started to run more smoothly under James's leadership, but I couldn't find peace. I had everything I thought I wanted, a flourishing business, a future I had envisioned for the company, but it felt hollow. My relationship with my daughter was fractured, and no amount of success could fill the void that had opened between us. I realized that no matter how much I tried to fix the business, I couldn't fix the damage I had done to my relationship with her. The company, in all its success, had come at a cost I hadn't anticipated, the cost of losing my daughter's trust, and with it, a piece of my own heart. I had thought I was making the right choice, but in the end, I had failed to see that sometimes the most important thing isn't the company's success, but the people who help build it. And now, I had to live with the consequences of that mistake. After I made the decision to push Rachel out of the business, everything started to unravel. The company, which had once seemed on the brink of thriving, now began to falter. James, despite all the praise I had given him, lacked the experience and the skill to manage the company. His enthusiasm couldn't mask the fact that he didn't know how to maintain the relationships and partnerships that had taken years to build. We started losing clients, suppliers, and partners. What had once been a growing business was quickly descending into chaos. I watched helplessly as the company, which Rachel and I had worked so hard to build, began to crumble. James struggled to keep things afloat. The deals I had set up with other businesses fell apart. The suppliers stopped coming through, and customers started walking away. I tried to console myself, telling myself it was just a rough patch. But deep down, I knew things were getting worse. I had hoped that James's vision would be enough to turn things around, but the reality was far different. He simply wasn't ready, and the mistakes began to pile up. It hit me harder than I expected, but the more I watched things fall apart, the more I realized how much I had relied on Rachel. She had been the one who kept the business running smoothly. It wasn't just the operations, it was her ability to build relationships, handle the day-to-day challenges, and make the tough decisions. Without her, the company felt lost. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I had made a huge mistake. I had pushed Rachel out of the business, thinking James would take the reins, but he couldn't. And now, I was watching everything I had worked for unravel. The guilt started eating away at me. How could I have been so blind? How could I have allowed my own pride and desire for a new direction to push away the person who had helped me build everything? It was clear that I needed Rachel. She had always been the backbone of the business, and now I needed her more than ever. I tried to contact her to apologize for what I had done, but I knew it was going to take more than just an apology. I had betrayed her trust, and I couldn't expect things to go back to normal just because I said I was sorry. I called her, nervously waiting for her to pick up. When she finally did, I could hear the hesitation in her voice. I apologized, telling her that I had been wrong, that I had pushed her out when I should have trusted her. I told her I was sorry for how I treated her, for what I had said, and for the way I had neglected everything she had done for the business. But Rachel didn't say much. She was quiet, and I could feel the distance in her words. I knew she had every right to be angry with me. I didn't expect her to just forgive me. I told her that I needed her back, that the business wasn't the same without her, and that I couldn't fix things without her help. I was at a loss for what to do. The business was struggling, and my relationship with Rachel was broken. I hoped that somehow she would see that I was sincere, that I was willing to make things right. She didn't agree to come back immediately. She needed time, and I respected that. I understood that I had hurt her, and it wasn't something that could be fixed overnight, but I still hoped that one day she would return to help rebuild what I had broken. The truth was, I didn't know how much longer the company could survive without her. It was falling apart, and I was watching it slip through my fingers. The regret weighed heavily on me. I had been so focused on what I thought was best, on what I believed the future should look like, that I had forgotten to appreciate the people who had helped me get there. I had made the mistake of believing that I could do it without Rachel, and now I had to live with the consequences. The business was in crisis, and I was left trying to repair the damage, hoping against hope that I could fix what I had broken, and that maybe, just maybe, Rachel would come back to help me. After I reached out to Rachel, hoping for a chance to make things right, she refused to help. Her words hit me harder than I expected. She told me that I had made everything too late and that there was no way to fix what had already been broken. I realized in that moment how deep my mistakes ran. I had asked her to give up her dreams and sacrifice everything for a company that, in hindsight, I had never truly appreciated the way I should have. Rachel had poured her heart into helping the business grow, and in the end, she had built something for herself, a successful consulting firm. She had created her own path, and there was no reason for her to return and help me fix what I had allowed to crumble. She was right. Why should she return to help a company that she was pushed out of? A company I promised would be hers one day, but had taken from her in favor of James? I felt the weight of my decisions more than ever. I regretted every moment I spent ignoring Rachel's contributions and treating her as if she didn't matter. I had neglected her, the person who worked tirelessly beside me, while I chased after a vision that wasn't clear. My guilt weighed heavily on me, knowing I could never undo the damage I caused to our relationship. She had every right to walk away, and in the end, I knew it wasn't her responsibility to fix the mess I had created. There were moments when I hoped she might come back, that maybe time would heal the wounds, but I had to face the reality that things would never be the same. Rachel had built her own life. She had moved on and had found success on her own terms. She didn't owe me anything, and I couldn't keep asking her to sacrifice more for a business that wasn't hers anymore. I realized then that I had lost more than just the business. I had lost her trust, and perhaps even her love. The damage wasn't just professional, it was personal. The bond we once shared had been eroded by my actions. I had let ambition cloud my judgment and put everything I valued at risk. The business, my relationship with Rachel, and my family, all of it had been affected by my decisions. Now I could only face the consequences of my choices. The business was in jeopardy, and I was alone in trying to repair it. The family was fractured, and the trust that had been built over years was broken. There was no easy way out, and the guilt I felt for what I had done to Rachel would remain with me. Rachel's decision to move on was painful for me, but I understood. She had every right to leave me to deal with the consequences. I couldn't fix everything. I couldn't undo the damage. The only thing left for me was to live with the reality of my mistakes and accept that sometimes things can't be repaired, no matter how much we want to fix them.